Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center, and on this one brand challenge, I'm picking out my top 5 Benchmade knives and asking the question, if this brand has what it takes to meet all my knife needs. Let's get into it. All right, so to get through life, I generally need about 5 different types of knives. I need a big folding knife, I need a formal or gentleman's knife, I need a kind of Goldilocks EDC knife, a belt knife fixed blade for when I'm out camping, and a larger chopping knife for bigger tasks when outdoors. And right there, that already presents a problem when we take a look at Benchmade, because that's a genre they don't really compete in anymore. So we're gonna mix things up a little bit today, and we'll substitute another category to replace that, I should say. And actually, quick housekeeping note before we jump into the first knife. We've got our Knife Rewards program at the Knife Center, and we're now offering double points on all Benchmade purchases, so don't forget that. Make sure to check those out. But let's get into the nitty-gritty. I got 3 picks here from each of my categories, and I'm going to present them and whittle them down. Let's start with the big knife, the big or full-size folding knife. This one's actually pretty interesting because I actually already own all 3 of these knives. If I were a thinking man, I would have brought in my actual pieces, but instead we've got fresh pieces here to take a look at. So for me, the question here actually becomes, which one of these would I keep if I could only keep one of them? Let me show you what I got here. The first is the Benchmade Freak, the full-size version with carbon fiber handles and an S90V blade, coming in about 315 bucks. And this is one of those knives that on paper, it seems like one thing, but then in the hand, it is revelatory. It is a completely excellent experience, an eye-opening experience when you pick it up. And it's down, in this case, I think, to the full carbon fiber handles here. They've got the girth of a beefier feeling knife, but they're so lightweight and balanced that this knife, despite its 3.6-inch blade, has a nimbleness to it that defies its size, and it's just such a pleasure to hold. As far as other features, we've got Benchmade's signature axis lock, which is on almost every folder here on the table, which suits me just fine because I am a big fan of it. The lock is strong, ambidextrous, and you can close it in a finger-safe manner, keeping your fingers completely out of the blade path. The blade itself, great slicing geometry on this, yet enough thickness there to feel like it can withstand some bigger cuts. S90V, not the toughest steel in the grand scheme of things, and not the toughest steel among these 3 I've got in this category. Will that hold it back? We'll find out. The next knife is one of my go-to recommendations for any heavy-duty folder, and that is the Benchmade Adamas. About 292 bucks and some change right now. About a 3.8-inch blade, crew wear steel, so you've got edge retention and an excellent amount of toughness. Not so much stain resistance, however, which is why you have a coating on this blade to help keep that away a little bit. It fills the hand. You've got full-length liners, and definitely a knife that imparts a feeling of strength when you hold it in the hand. The blade itself, not as slicey as the Freak. It's a little more leaning into that brute force nature. Action, quite good on that axis lock, reversible clip, as is to be expected. The blade here, like I said, nice and tough, really suited to kind of tactical applications as well as heavy duty work, and wouldn't be a bad outdoor blade either. And in fact, that's one of the things I want my larger folder to be able to do if I need to take it out camping, where I might not be able to have a fixed blade, or might not want to have a fixed blade for one reason or another. I want a nice, strong folder that will do that side of things too. Certainly a great choice for blade geometry for that task here. And last but not least is the Presidio 2. I think a bit of an underrated gem in Benchmade's lineup. 3 3/4-inch blade, or just about S30V steel. Gives you a good blend of edge retention, okay enough toughness for heavier use when you need it. Certainly tougher than the S90V, even though it won't hold an edge as long as the S90V right there. 180 bucks for this knife. I love the CF Elite handles on here. It keeps the weight down, even though this does have full-size liners just like the Adamas. The Adamas has G10 handle scales, which are heavier. The CF Elite is a carbon fiber reinforced nylon. Feels good. It has a little bit of texture or a little bit of color to it. It's not quite black, which is kind of nice. And like I said, the weight is down. What this knife has going for it, differing from the other two, is it's not quite as hand-filling of a grip because you have slightly slimmer handle scales, but the shape itself is more neutral. So lots of different grips are perhaps a little more comfortable than on these other two knives, and any hand size, or whether I'm choked back on it or whether I'm wearing bigger gloves, this is a handle that works really well for that sort of thing. And I also appreciate that you can get right up there behind the edge due to the way they have this finger guard sloping out gently as opposed to giving you, say, a more abrupt finger guard like on the Adamas. That makes it a little more comfortable, a little more precise in some of those holds. Which one will prevail? We shall see after we get through the other options. Next category, a gentleman's knife, or a formal knife if you're not a gentleman. And for me, the main caveat that my gentleman's knife has to conform to is it has got to have a 3-inch blade or under, because of certain places I might be carrying said gentleman's knife, I can only have that size blade. So that's what works for me. When talking about Benchmade's lineup, carbon fiber is kind of the go-to handle material here. I've actually got 3 sub 3-inch bladed folders, all with carbon fiber and all with S90V steel as well. So nice small blade, but plenty of edge retention with that S90V. Let's talk about the 945, the smaller version of the flagship 940 Osborne. No, top 5 Benchmade video is going to be complete without one of these, right? Or at least one of the variants. $306 for this knife. Reverse Tanto blade shape, that the actual blade that started that reverse Tanto nomenclature right here. The carbon fiber looks pretty classy. You've got blue accents on the back in the form of those barrel spacers. Nice action as well, and just a very distinct style. Like, even today, all these years later after the introduction of the original 940 Osborne, there's nothing out there that quite looks like this family of knives. So definitely getting a distinctive piece of knife history with this knife. Next up, the mini version of the other knife that Benchmade is most known for these days. Between the Osborne series and the bug out, we've got the mini bug out here. Carbon fiber S90V, just like the previous knife, $288. Edge geometry here is going to be definitely a bit slicier than that 945. And on a small knife like this, that does go a long way for me. Blade itself is 2.8 inches long in this case. And one of the things I've found about the minis, however, of the mini bug outs, I should say, is they're not as easy to flick as some of the larger or heavier blades out there. Would I get used to it? Probably, but it is worth noting that they just don't quite have that same fluid feel as some of the other axis lock knives in the lineup. And that seems to have been fairly consistent for me with these that I have tried over time. But still, a very nice blade. Next up, the mini version of the Freak we just looked at. 306 for this right now. Largest blade of these small knives here, coming right in at that 3-inch mark. And like the big sibling here, it's got a thicker handle. So you've got something that gives you more grip than either of these two smaller knives. It means you could flex it up in its roll a little bit more if you wish. It will not lie as flat, let's say, in a pair of dress pants or the breast pocket of a suit, however. So is the extra bulk worth it? We'll find out. Still, great edge geometry, great cutting geometry, I should say, with the high flat grind on this knife as well. Definitely love that. So for my third category, I want just a general purpose, as I call it, a Goldilocks everyday carry knife. Something that, in this case, is going to sit somewhere between the gentleman's knife and the big knife in usage. And often, I'll try to keep that to a 3-inch length as well, just because of the certain locations I tend to traverse. But in this case, I'm going to open it up a little bit because the minis here feel so much on the small side, and these larger knives, there's a big gap between them. There's a big hole in the middle, and let's see what we can slot in there. First up, another mini version of a knife we've already looked at, the Mini Presidio 2. And this is on here again because The Presidio lineup is grossly underrated and underappreciated in Benchmade's lineup. It's great. You can kind of think of the Presidio 2, despite the mini in its name, as being sort of an alternative to the Benchmade bug out if you don't care about the ultralight aspects of the bug out. It's got roughly the same size, roughly the same shape, although not quite as slicey on the edge geometry, but it gives you that type of form factor with a little more to hold on to. $162 for this 3.2-inch S30V blade, decent edge geometry for slicing, same CF Elite handle material we just talked about, same neutral shape for all kinds of hand sizes and different variety of grips as well. And it's just a deft little cutter that will give you, enough of a grip. If you need to push it higher, push it bigger, it will work. Next up, the Benchmade Bailout. Now I actually own one of these with the green aluminum blade, but this, the aluminum handled Bailout with the M4 blade steel, is a knife that speaks to me, even though Tanto blades don't usually speak to me. And that's because this is still a nice, useful, slicey blade. And I say useful because it's useful for me. Other people may have different uses, of course. $270 for this, about almost a 3.4-inch blade, but it doesn't quite feel that big because the blade is slim, the handles are slim, and yet the aluminum is nice and strong and stable feeling. Gives you plenty to hold on to when you need a bigger grip, but it is a very easy knife to carry thanks to that overall slim cross section. This is not really a tactical knife in my mind, even though Tanto blades are typically more associated with tactical use. Yes, the M4 blade is nice and tough. The M4 blade is also going to hold an edge quite a long time, but it's not something that I want to stab into car doors and pry with. Proof videos out there, you know what I'm talking about, but it is a great blade shape and would be a decent alternative to these other two categories. I mean, everything I'm looking at in the formal knife and the big knife category is a drop point blade, or almost a drop point blade. So the Tanto could add some variety to it. We'll see. And last but not least, the Mini Crooked River. This is a knife that's always sort of amused me because Mini is in the name, yet this is a decidedly regular sized knife in my opinion. $270, 3.4-inch S30V clip point blade, more old school type of styling for sure. You've got the stabilized wood veneer handles, aluminum bolsters, orange accents on the backspacer and the pivot collar. I've actually got a custom shop version of a Mini Crooked River in my collection, and I do enjoy it very much as well. And it is a very easy knife to carry. It's got, like these other two knives, a size that's easy. It's kind of just right, and yet it has enough girth and enough grip in the hand that you can make bigger cuts when you want to do it. All three would be good options. All right, next up, fixed blades. And sadly, it's only one category of fixed blades we're looking at today. When I'm going camping, I need that primary belt knife, and these are gonna have to be it. I don't get a bigger fixed blade in the Benchmade lineup, but fortunately, hatchets and machetes fall outside the purview of a one brand collection. So there are tools that can do what I need to do out there. They just don't exist in one convenient big fixed blade. But let's talk about the main belt knife. The newly reintroduced 163 Bushcrafter from Shane Siebert, the designer, and it's a more neutral shape than the original 162 Bushcrafter. What you got here is a $360 knife with a 4.4-inch blade, just about, S30V steel, flat saber grind right there. Just a stout feeling knife overall, both in the blade, which is coming in about 5/32 of an inch thick, so a little bit less thick than those originals, still plenty strong. It's gonna slice a little bit better as a result. And despite blocky looking handles, they're actually pretty comfortable in the hand. They don't feel as blocky as pictures would suggest. The handle's neutral enough, or more neutral than the original Bushcrafter. You've got the flared tubes here for tying lanyards and that sort of thing through if you need to. Just a stout thing. If you want to strike a fire steel, you can do that with the sharpened choil area right here. The edges of that are crisp enough and the right shape for scraping typically sized fire steels. And the sheath on this knife is nice, soft leather. You've got a retention strap with the flap pointed backwards, which I like to help prevent snagging, and fire steel loop on the side. Next up, we've got the Saddle Mountain Skinner. Skinner in the name, you might think this is more of a hunting knife than a general purpose outdoors knife, and you'd be correct, but it still does general purpose pretty well. This is a $252 knife with the S90V blade. You can also get it with S30V and the laminated wood handle scales for less money if you wish. But check out that really nice flaring drop point blade shape. Thinner blade here than the Bushcrafter, and with a nice higher flat grind. This is definitely going to win in terms of slicing character between the two. Handles are a bit thinner. The Richlite material here feels really good, but it doesn't quite fill the hand as much as the Bushcrafter, which makes sense. On a knife, you want to be nimble when doing those butchering and field dressing types of tasks. You don't want too much handle getting in the way. The sheath is bolt-on. It'll click in just like Kydex. Doesn't come with any belt attachment hardware, however, so if I pick this, I will have to supply something like a tech lock. Fortunately, I have a few of those lying around, but that is something to consider. Next up, the Anonymous. Here it is. This is coming in at $279 right now. You got a 5-inch blade, a little more reach than these other two. Crewwear steel. If I were picking these based just on steel between these three, I would go with the Crewwear because I like the toughness that brings to the table, and on an outdoor knife, that is a nice thing. Counteracting that toughness a little bit is a thinner blade overall. So you get some toughness from the steel, and yet you are still able to maintain slicing capability. Handles are G10. Again, not quite as filling as the Bushcrafter, but they do a pretty decent job. Overall, very agile, and we've got that sharpening choil there for running your fire steel through when you want to strike some sparks for a fire, and a more significant finger guard here at the front to keep your digits from slipping forward. I think blade shape overall on all of these, all of them are going to do most general purpose things pretty well. They could be hunters, they could be camp knives, they could do bushcrafty stuff. We'll find out what I pick soon. Figuring these out as I go along a little bit, so that's kind of fun too. All right, next up, as I mentioned, no bigger fixed blade because Benchmade doesn't really do that these days. But one thing they do that isn't represented anywhere else here is automatic knives. So that's going to be the 5th category today. An automatic knife that's going to fulfill maybe some tactical roles, even though I don't technically need tactical in my daily uses. So I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to look at some automatic knives in Benchmade's lineup that I think are going to slice pretty well and make pretty good daily companions for me. The first is the Claymore series. Fairly lightweight for a side opening automatic. We're dealing about 3.5 ounces for a 3.6-inch bladed knife, and that's down to the Grivery handles here, keeping the weight down. $234 for these 3.6-inch CPM D2 blade. Some people will go, oh, I wish they'd use something better than D2. Well, they did. It's CPM D2, which is a powder metal version of D2, which maintains the edge retention that D2 is known for, but gets rid of the quote-unquote toughness problem that D2 faces. Because the carbides in this CPM version are smaller, getting into the weeds here a little bit, basically what that means is the blade is much more tough, so less prone to chipping, a little more able to just kind of be used hard without fear of damaging the blade. And still great edge retention. And great slicing geometry too. Nice and thin, high flat grind. Very, very nice. We've got the safety switch there that is going to work in the open or closed position. And let me tell you about the action on these Claymores. Fantastic. Every time you hit that button, the blade just slams home into position, which is quite nice. The grip is a little more tactically oriented than some of the other stuff we've looked at. It really feels great in this kind of saber grip here with your thumb pushing against the ramp. Feels plenty good in terms of traction as well, but it's not so quote unquote tactical that it's still not a useful knife, and it is a very useful looking knife. Next up, the Shootout. What I really like about the Shootout is it's one of the few OTF autos out there with blade geometry that feels like it was made to slice well, as opposed to being you know, a more durable, rugged, heavy-duty tactical implement, this was designed to be used every day, in my opinion. 3.5-inch blade, $315, crew wear steel. So again, the similar thing you saw on the Anonymous is you can run a thinner blade while still maintaining some toughness, and that gets you that slicing geometry that you've got with this almost full flat grind on this knife as well. Also lightweight, and in this case it's due to the Grivery handles. CF Elite is also an option. This is about 2.8 ounces, so it's almost not there, which means it's easy to carry. The action is excellent. As you can see, the blade itself comes out of the middle of the handle as opposed to being offset to some side, or to one side, which is something that is pretty cool. You don't see that too often. Texture on the handle is very aggressive, and this could be something that sways me one way or the other. The section right here underneath the clip has some texture, and that is going to, you know, transfer onto the hem of your pocket as you draw this knife over time. And the orange peel section up here, acting as thumb pads, is very aggressive. Like your finger, as it goes across it, really does get trapped on it to keep it from moving forward, which is intentional and is a nice thing, but for daily carry, is that too much? Not sure. Anyway, this version right here at the $315 mark is one of the seasonal releases. There are a few different color options available, as I said, and some with a glass breaker on the end. This version, however, has the simple bail. Actually, that's the same thing with the bailout we looked at earlier. The green version of this has a glass breaker on the end as well. Last but not least, in the autos category, the CLA. Bit of an overlooked model in Benchmade's lineup, but that might be down to the standard steel choice, which is why they came out with this version with a Magna Cut blade. So very tough, very edge retention-y, and very stainless as well. $360, 3.4-inch blade, great drop point shape. In fact, this is, whether it's an auto or not, this would be just a great general purpose shape for a blade and handle for everyday carry. The action, similarly to that Claymore we looked at, is quite good. Maybe between these two, just a little bit slower, but still quite nice. And that safety switch that'll work both ways as well. Great EDC. All right, it's time to make some decisions. So let's go back to the beginning. We've got the full-size category. A reminder, we've got the Freak with S90V steel and carbon fiber handles. We've got the Adamas with crew wear steel and G10 handles, and we've got the Presidio 2 with CF Elite handles and an S30V blade. And in hand, I think I'm definitely going to go with the Presidio 2. And it's down to that hand feel. These other two knives, admittedly, fill the hand better. I'm not going to argue that, at least for me. Your mileage may, of course, vary, but the neutrality of the Presidio 2's handle and the slightly easier time of carrying it in the pocket are going to win the day. And I have used and carried one of these extensively, so I know that that lack of a more hand-filling grip is not going to bother me. I'm going to take the agility and the portability of this knife for my big knife of choice. And this is a knife that will fill all those big cutting needs, all those bigger knife rolls when I need to head out into more adverse environments as well. I'm gonna have this by my side. All right, for the formal knife, really what I need a small knife to do, whether it's formal or not, is slice well, because it's not going to need to do big cuts. So I want the best slicing I can have. So I'm gonna knock off, for that reason, immediately the 945. Slices okay, certainly, but these other two knives are gonna slice better. So really what it comes down to now is, do I want the smallness and slimness of that mini bug out, or do I want these slightly more hand-filling grips of the Mini Freak? Both are gonna slice real well. You can see the Mini bug out will edge it out just a little bit, but we're talking small degrees of difference here. Like the Presidio, I'm gonna go with the slightly easier to carry, slightly flatter handled mini bug out in this case. That's gonna be a great little small and inoffensive knife to take places where you need something just like this. So there's two of the picks, leaving a good gap between the two as well for the Goldilocks EDC, which let's go through those. Mini Presidio, again, smaller sibling to the big Presidio. We've got the Bailout Slim Tanto, adds some variety to the blade shapes, and the Mini Crooked River. I'm gonna take out the Mini Presidio just because we've already got the full size and I feel like I should give one of the other knives a shot. So now we're down to two. I know what I'm picking, and I'll tell you why. It is going to be the Bailout right here. And it's because, as much as I like the clip point blade shape, one of the things I like to do, and it's one of the reasons I like a drop point blade, is coming in under some plastic packaging or something, lifting the tip up by using the hump of that blade, and then I can just run that blade along what I'm cutting. There is enough drop to the edge of this Tanto blade that I can still do that. And I get a Tanto blade to add some variety to the lineup. I can do some of that forward scraping types of cuts with this, and it's gonna be a very easy knife still to carry. And I think complements those really well. That is a pretty well-rounded set of folders, I think. So those are gonna be my folder choices. Sorry, Mini Crooked River, I like you too, but you're going over there. Fixed blades. All right, we've got the Bushcrafter, we've got the saddle mounted Skinner, and we've got the Anonymous. I'm taking the saddle mounted Skinner off because the handles are slimmer, and if one of the things I'm gonna need my primary belt knife to do is I like to whittle. I like to make stuff sitting around a campfire, and I want a little more girth to the handles here. It also doesn't come with a belt attachment option out of the box, so that's a bit of a demerit against it, I think. A surmountable one, certainly, but yeah. All right. I think ultimately it's gonna come down to handle feel between these two, because either blade is gonna work fine, and I can see the pros and cons of going with the slimmer, slicier blade or the slightly beefier blade. I might lean slightly beefier just because I don't have a bigger fixed blade at this point, but let's do a solid squeeze grip between the two. This is something where everyone's is going to feel a little bit differently, but for me, the Bushcrafter takes it. It feels good enough in the hand. It feels girthier than the Anonymous. It comes with a really nice leather sheath. I like leather sheaths when I'm headed out there. There's my choice. It's looking pretty good. All right, what goes best from the autos here with these guys? Now, if I use some of my logic from before, I ought to take out the Shootout, because the Shootout is essentially an OTF version of the Bailout, and I've already picked the Bailout. So I should take this out. I'm not quite ready to do that yet, though. Maybe I will. Let's work up to it. Let's see if I can take one of the other two out then. Let's see. How do these compare to what I've already got? The CLA would fit into that Goldilocks EDC category for me if it weren't for the automatic mechanism. So an alternative to the Bailout that we see right there. Whereas the Claymore, let's see how it compares next to, wow, next to the Presidio 2, despite the blade lengths purportedly being different, the sharpened edge between the two is pretty similar, in fact. Slightly less on the Claymore, but not by much. So that's more of a bigger knife too. All right, so what I'll do, I'll take the Claymore out because my Goldilocks size knife, I'm usually a drop point person, so this would get that back into the rotation because since I already picked the Tanto blade of the Shootout. So now it comes down to these two. I do own a Shootout. So even with its, its textural things that I'm not the hugest fan of, I still own one. I don't own a CLA, however. Makes no difference because in the conceit of this video, I only get 5 knives anyway. I'm gonna go with the CLA. I expected it to be the shootout, but I'm gonna go with the CLA for the reasons I stated. I get a drop point back into my general purpose Goldilocks size, and it gives me a little more variety from the other knife of a similar size right there. Plus it gets Magna Cut steel. That's really great stuff. And this knife has it. Well, there you have it. At least for me, right now in 2024, these are my top 5 Benchmade knives. Now let me know, what are yours? Can Benchmade fulfill all of your knife needs? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if you want to get your hands on any of the knives we looked at here today, there'll be links in the description that will take you to KnifeCenter.com. While you're there, don't forget about our Knife Rewards program, because if you're gonna buy a knife from us today, the least thing we can do is give you some free money to spend on your next one. And remember, double points on all Benchmade now. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center signing off. See you next time.